David, thank you so much for joining us. So David has a background in private equity, and about a year ago, we completed on an acquisition. And in that acquisition, I happen to be your lawyer.
Yes.
So today, we'll be discussing David's experience with that deal, from finding the target business up until completion, and even post-completion, so dealing with things like staff. Again, David, thank you for joining me.
No, I'm glad to be here.
To get started, let's give a bit of a background to the situation. Was this your first acquisition?
No, so the first acquisition was back in 2010. I was working in a business that was my father's business. He had a business partner. Both of them were reaching sort of retirement age, and they were looking for a succession. So me and another guy became partners, and we did a management buyout in 2010. We sort of grew that business for about 9 years, and then I exited in 2019. The business carried on with me. So basically my partner bought me out. We went our separate ways. I then got into a few other things, got into a startup along the same sort of, obviously I had an anti-competition clause, so I went into doing kitchens and fitted kitchens and things like that. So my background has always been in manufacturing a product that then gets installed on site. Had a fantastic first 12 months, and then COVID came along. And it really been a brand new business as a startup.
Yeah.
It struggled with customers, supply, sites being closed, projects being postponed or cancelled altogether. So the sort of recovery period from COVID was really, really difficult. We took on some bad debts with customers going under, owing us money. And that business got to a point where we just couldn't carry on. So we had to close the business. We had no choice. We had to close the business. That left me looking for an income stream again. A friend of mine had been involved with a private equity group of businesses in a chairman role. And he contacted me. He knew my situation. He knew I was looking for something. And he said, look, the private equity firm has bought this window business 5 months ago. The whole thing's been drifting. We need to put an MD in place ASAP. Do you want to get involved? You know, the contract can be as long as you want. We just need a leader in the business.
Yeah.
The outgoing owners were still in the business, getting very frustrated because they'd sold the business, but they're still there.
Yeah.
So the whole thing was getting a bit tense. So I went in there as MD, and literally every day just found a new horror story. The business was in serious trouble. It was a big business. It was turning over about £9 million.
Wow. Everything
was wrong. It just didn't seem like any DD had been done.
Right.
There were skeletons coming out the closet every day.
What kind of issues?
The main ones, the business was losing money.
Yeah.
So the business was doing all new build homes, windows and doors for new build homes.
Yeah.
The order book was about 17 million, so it was fantastic. Forward order book for about 3 years.
Yeah.
But the selling price was less than the cost price to make the windows.
Right, I see.
So the business was hemorrhaging money.
Yes.
We were in fixed price contracts for periods of times, and there was something like 85 contracts that had to be renegotiated. Every day, the fitting teams were going out, fitting windows. They were breaking glass, damaging windows, to the point there was something like 1,500 outstanding snags.
Wow.
And in the whole thing was just, so our customers were annoyed because they were trying to move
ahead
new buyers into new properties with broken windows.
Yeah.
We were getting asked we could make about 3,000 windows a month. Our customers were placing orders for about 6,000 windows a month.
Right. Okay.
So we were like under the cosh from day one.
Yeah.
We were paying installation teams more money than we were charging our customers for the installation.
Right.
So the whole thing was just.
What was the reasoning behind that? Secure work now.
I don't know. The business had won a lot of new contracts prior to the takeover. Yeah. Whether that was done intentionally to ensure the business was won. Okay. To make it, it's an attractive business with £17 million.
I see.
Of forward work.
Yeah.
The whole building was falling down. The machinery was ancient. It was on its last legs, and it was just as if nothing had been looked at, you know. And it just made it very difficult to operate. The business was losing best part of £100,000 a month. So very quickly, cash was drying up. Well, our customers said, "Look, you need to get on top of these snags." Money was being withheld because we were behind on fitting, on snags and things like that. So the whole thing was really, really difficult, really difficult. And then we got into paying the outgoing sellers the deferred payments. And in a year, the deferred payment was twice the net profit of the business.
Yeah.
So the numbers didn't stack up.
Yeah. Which we'll discuss in a minute.
Yeah.
How to go about structuring a deal that is affordable.
So long story short on that, we got to a point where the PE owners had to inject some funds.
Okay.
They didn't want to do that. They wanted to go the other way, cut costs.
Yeah.
And it was just became untenable. So I parted company with them. And then that's really what promoted me to start looking for my own business. And what I did learn working there was the mechanism of how to buy a business
and what not to do,
and the experience of being there, of what to look for, you know, what to check, you know, make sure that there's due diligence done. So I started my own journey in sort of September. So that would have been September 23. Okay. Listened to podcasts, read books. You know, there's a lot of information out there on buying businesses. I started to go through the broker route, and I probably looked at 20 businesses in those early, in that first month, really, just trying to see what was, you know, what was about, really.
And when you say look, do you mean actually attending the company's premises, viewing?
No, just initially just getting the MI off the broker. Yeah. I quickly understood that even though a business is for sale doesn't mean that you can buy it. Yeah.
Or that you should.
Or if you should. I did in the early days. I found a couple of businesses I was interested in. Went to meet the owners. I had a couple of early offers rejected. Okay. And it was quite apparent in some situations that we were miles apart on valuations. Yeah. You know, businesses doing maybe say £250,000 profit, looking for a selling price of sort of 3, 4, 5 million. Well, it's just too far apart. Yeah. You know, and eventually I came across the business that I bought. Yeah. I dismissed it initially, purely because it was a family business and there was a lot of family members in the business. The business with the PE was a family business with a lot of family members. Right, okay. And had already been bruised. Yeah. But that didn't stop you from? No, I thought I don't know if this is it. Yeah. You know, if this is right. The broker contacted me and said, "Look, we've sent you this. What's your thoughts?" And I was honest with them. I said, "Look, it looks a reasonable business. I'm interested. It's just the family, you know. Is there a danger if you annoy one of them that then it's me against the family?" Yes. And he said, "No, I don't think you'd experience that in this business." In this particular one. In this particular one, okay. And he said it's a good business and it's worth exploring a bit deeper. Yeah. So I said, okay, then, well, let's set up a Zoom call with the sellers and let's just have a fact-finding session where I could just sort of delve in and just find out a bit more about the business, how many staff, the turnover, what products they did, what type of customers, any issues in the business, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And I think probably the biggest thing that came out of that was an instant rapport with the sellers. We'd really hit it off from a relationship point of view. And I think that's probably one of the single most important things that happened to get this deal over the line. Yeah. So from that, I said, well, I'm interested. Can I come and have a look at the premises. So selling business is always confidential. So I went and visited the business out of hours. Liked what I saw.
Yep.
Sat with the sellers. They had a guide price that they were looking for. I explained the way I would buy the business and how we would structure a deal.
Yeah.
They were on board with that
Immediately.
So immediately, yeah.
Okay.
Didn't cause any concerns.
The structure, which we will talk about.
Yeah. Discussed it with my wife because we do everything in business 50-50, and we liked what we saw, and I think this is a good business. It's not too far from home.
Yeah.
It's about an hour or so away. I liked it that it was a long-standing business.
How many years?
Probably 50 in different forms.
Right.
Because it was started by the father.
Yeah.
And then his daughters took it over.
Yeah.
So in its current form, it's 19 years.
Yeah.
So it's
Current form meaning the limited company.
yes.
It's been-
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It survived COVID, which was obviously
Yeah.
good, but it was actually remained profitable, even though profits dipped.
Yeah.
It remained and it rode COVID out.
Yeah.
So I thought this is a strong business.
Yeah.
So we put an initial offer in. That was declined by the broker. He said, "I'll put it to the family, but I'm going to recommend they take it. They don't take it."
What was the initial offer? So that we can compare it to what has been accepted, or
So
what are the key differences, I should say.
Yeah. So it was about 20% under the asking price.
I see.
They came back with a counter offer.
Okay.
They said, "We like you as a person. We think
Yeah.
you're a good fit for this business.
Yeah.
We liked what."
How key is that?
That was brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, that was, as I said earlier, it's about rapport.
Yeah.
And it's about the relationship.
Yeah.
But you've got to build trust.
Yes.
You've got to build trust in that as well. And we obviously managed to do that in the 2 meetings that I had with them. So
20% lower.
20% lower. And then they came back with a counter offer. It was a little bit higher, but I had another look at the numbers and I thought, well, actually, this is a fair counter offer.
Yeah.
And pretty much in line with what a second offer would have probably looked like from myself. So this takes us right up to sort of just before Christmas 23. So we actually got heads of terms signed pre-Christmas.
Yeah.
I even think it might have even been Christmas Eve. Come back into had the Christmas break, New Year, come back in January. We went all through the DD process and I think we completed really quickly within 3 months. And
I'm glad you say that. Please say that again. I think 3 months for a lot of people seems like a long time.
Yeah. I mean, it was 3 months worked for 2 reasons from my point of view.
Yeah.
Number one, it was from a business point of view, it was the year end. So it was a good natural break.
Handover, yeah.
From my point of view, I was living on savings.
Yeah.
And my savings were going to run out at the end of March anyway.
Yeah.
So I needed to complete. That was important, or it was going to be beans and no toast for dinner. So So that sort of really worked.
Fantastic. So you have a background in the industry or similar sectors or spaces. But is there a particular reason outside of being familiar with it that you chose Windows?
First, as you've mentioned, it fitted with my experience.
Yeah.
So I've always had a manufacturing background and making a product to go to site. So even though it's a different product, the processes are very, very similar. But what I liked about it is that it's such a large industry, being glazing, doors, windows. Yeah. You're not going to get an Amazon come along and control the market, and the market's huge.
Yeah.
So there's enough to go around for everybody. There's no one big player in the market. There has been some big players sort of go bust recently in the last sort of 2 years.
Okay.
So it just means that us smaller players, that there's more to go around.
Yeah.
So that was really the driver behind that. It's a good solid business. It's also a product that's going to need renewing.
Yeah.
10 years down the line.
Yeah.
So it's you're getting the return business.
And you emphasize the product itself, the manufacturing, selling of a product. But you emphasize also the installation, the service part. Is there a reason for that?
No, not really. It was just, I mean, if you're buying windows, you want someone to come along and install them, really. So it's all part and parcel of the thing. But it was just a good fit with my background.
With your background.
And I just thought I could add value. You know, my whole sort of working career has been in and around sites, building sites, and it's just an area that I thought I could add quite a lot of value to the business. I know a lot of people in the construction industry, so it's could I add value, you know, in terms of additional customers to the business if the business was to need it.
I see. Yes. Fantastic. Okay. Long-term strategy.
This business manufactures aluminium windows in-house, but we buy in plastic windows, UPVC. So the next step would be a UPVC window manufacturer, and that would be a good strategic acquisition to complement this first business. So that's going to be our next step. That's what we're looking for. And then I think after that, you know, is there a possibility? Obviously, we use a lot of glass. You know, there's quite a few sort of small glass manufacturers out there. Would it be a benefit for us to move into the glass production? So again, I'm looking more for strategic acquisitions to build a small group of like-minded businesses that are really all feeding each other. Yeah,
you have a background in private equity.
Yes.
So you might still have some contacts there. Yeah. Is, if I may ask, the eventual goal to build a group that can be sold?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I'm getting older. I will be looking to retire at some point. Yeah. You know, be it that I'm probably 6, 7, 8, 9 years away from that at the moment. So I've got to have an eye on that. I mentioned earlier that my son has now come into the business. Yeah. He's got a keen interest in sort of finance. He can see what I've done to purchase this business, and he's interested in that and taking the next steps with me. So that's really encouraging.
The target business you found it through a broker?
Yes. Yeah.
Was it listed on their website, or did you contact them directly?
It was listed. It was listed on their website. I literally just did a Google search for window businesses for sale. I think I looked at probably about 20 businesses in total. They're a mixed bag. There's some are just too small, where you would be buying a job. You know, it's literally the owner and maybe two members of staff doing the fitting. I didn't want that type of business. I wanted a business that was big enough that it had a team that I could just come into, and the team are actually running the business or you know, performing the processes, and I'm just there to sort of guide the business in the direction that I want to take it.
Do you think there's a rule of thumb, like a minimum threshold that qualifies a business as one that isn't you buying a job? For example, in number of employees or revenue?
Yeah, I mean, revenue, definitely over £1 million turnover. Yeah. I think once you're over that, you've got a business that's not necessarily a job. You know, and if you can get into the sort of 2 to 3 million, £4 million mark, then you've definitely got a really good business. Yeah. This particular business had 20 staff, 8 on the fitting side, a couple in the factory, and then the rest was split between trade counter, ordering, quoting, estimating. So it was a good solid base of a
living
team
and breathing organism.
Yeah. And all the staff had been there along, you know, many years. So it was a really solid team.
How did you find the staff? When was the first time that you actually met them, and how did that go?
The first time I met the staff was actually on the day after completion.
Yeah, surprise.
So basically my first day. Yeah. So, you know, it's a big deal. So the sellers wanted to get all the staff together on their own initially, just to say, look, this has happened.
On their own, meaning just the sellers and the staff? Or?
Yes, just the sellers and the staff. So the first morning of when we took over, I don't know if you remember, we actually completed on a Thursday, and it was the day before Good Friday.
Right.
So we had the Easter the long weekend, so the Tuesday was the first day. We didn't come into the office till about 9, half 9, so it just gave them the chance to get all the staff together, explain what's going on. One or two were shocked. It's probably fair to say one or two were annoyed. There were some saw it as a positive.
Yeah.
Sort of said, yeah, okay, this is the future. This is going forward.
Yeah.
We met everybody, and everybody was friendly.
Good.
There was, I think, going back to the PE business, when I went into that business, even though it was 5 months after acquisition,
Yeah.
there was still a nervousness within the staff.
Yeah.
That this business got sold 5 months ago, nothing's happening, and everybody was fearful for their jobs and things like that. And I felt that when I went in, and one or two of the sort of more like outspoken people sort of said, "Look, is our job safe?
Yeah.
Do I need to find another job?"
Yeah.
And it was, the message was absolutely not.
Yeah.
I'm not coming in. I'm not making wholesale changes day one.
Yeah.
Everybody, we've got to build a relationship with all the staff, and likewise, the staff's got to build one with me.
Yeah.
But I want to come in and just see how the business operates, how everybody is, who does what, what's good, what's not so good. Is there anything that needs changing? But I was very conscious that it's very easy to go into a business and start making changes without fully understanding why something was done like that in the first place.
Yeah, context.
So I did make a conscious effort. Like I'm not going in day one and saying, right, you're now doing this. This is now your job. And I'm not doing that. I just wanted to see how the business ticked. And as we got into it in the first few weeks, there was a couple of things I wanted to change. So more around the sort of like the planning, especially of the installation work, I felt was quite ad hoc. And I said, look, we want to just be planning. We don't have to plan months ahead, but I do want to start putting a plan in for where the fitters are going on a sort of rolling 2 week basis. And I don't know what it is with window businesses, but they're always very paper based, reams and reams of paper. And so if you want some information, you've got to go hunting in the paperwork for it. So I just wanted to make the information
accessible,
slightly more visible and easier to find the answers. If when's this glass order going to get delivered, things like that. So we introduced some sort of tracking software, just simple software, just to track every order, so we can see where it is. So it's just a quick go to one place, one piece of software. Yeah. Search what you're looking for very quickly. And
did you train the staff on how to use the?
Well, it's so simple. They didn't need training. They just sort of could see what it.
They were open to it. Open to learning. Yeah. Yes.
And everyone's been open to the ideas that I've put in place. Yeah. The fitters. I've said it's you just carry on doing your job, but the biggest thing is that you go to site and you try to finish that job in as least number of visits as possible. Yeah. If it means staying another half hour at the end of the day to get finished, you stay half hour. You don't go back the following day. Or if something goes wrong, like, it's easy to break glass. If you break a piece of glass, communicate that. Don't let the customer tell us that we've got a broken piece of glass. And again, this was the experience of having the 1,500 outstanding items with the previous. Lessons learned from the private equity business that I could apply in this business on a smaller scale.
Do you think, for anyone listening right now who hasn't bought a business and whose experience is different to the kind of business that they want to buy, do you think that having a background in the industry is essential?
It's not essential. Yeah. But I think it helps. Yeah. I think you can, if you already know an industry, you can come in, you get up to speed very quickly because you know a lot already, rather than coming in cold and not only having to learn how that business operates, how you make your money, how the customers work, so that's a steep learning curve. day one. So if you've got that background, I think you're onto a better winner, and you're already adding value to
Yes.
that business day one. So I think that's key. But it's not impossible to say, right, I'm gonna switch industries. My background is really furniture.
Right. Okay.
So to go from furniture to windows, okay, I'm not technically minded on the windows, so that's my learning curve. That's where I've got to get up to speed. But I'm not there to be the technical brain of the specifications of the windows.
Right.
I've got good staff who are knowledgeable and know that. So I can lean on them for that knowledge.
Fantastic. And typically we do have sellers who stay for a period of time.
Yes. Yeah.
To help with transition.
Yeah.
Show the ropes a little bit, but of course having more knowledge is better than less.
Yes, yeah. So we had a slightly unique situation where two of the sellers wanted to stay on as employees.
Yeah.
So the MD who wanted to retire, she ran the business. She ran everything, the day to day. So there was three sisters.
Yeah.
The other two sisters didn't want to run the business. They were happy performing their roles in the business, and they were more than happy to stay on. And, I have to say they've been great. It's difficult when you sell a business and you're no longer the owner. You're no longer making the decisions, and you're no longer calling the shots.
Yeah.
But they've adapted really well to the process, and I can't fault them. I can't fault their attitude. They're still as dedicated to the business as they were when they owned it. So.
And if someone is looking to buy a business and wants to benefit from the same experience that you've had, meaning everyone is on board and quite positive about the change, what advice would you give?
I think it's if the owner was going to sell and wanted to leave, I think it's important to have a handover.
Yeah.
Typically 3 months. What we did with the MD, we had a month full time. I believe it was a month, 3 days a week, and a month 1 day a week. So a reducing handover, and that worked really well. The first month was full on. I sort of used the opportunity to get as much information on customers, how the business operates, suppliers, and everything that makes the business tick. And then when we dropped down to 3 days a week, it was fine, because it then gave me a little bit of breathing space 2 days a week to say, okay, start to get a feel for the business, start to drive the business in the direction I wanted to go, but still a useful, knowledge base, to sort of say, look, what about this? What about that? Can you answer this query?
Yeah.
Can you help me with this? And it worked. It really did work for me, and and I think it worked for the seller as well. As a time, it's always difficult. I think once you've sold the business, and it's as I said, when I sold my first business, I stayed on for 6 months, and to be honest, that was probably 5 months too long. I couldn't wait to get out in the end, because you're not, for want of a better word, you're not the future.
Yeah.
The business is going to move on without you, and you're better just getting out, really. But as a new owner taking over, you definitely need that handover of at least a month.
Yeah, and I think if the seller has agreed to part of the purchase price being deferred, which is often the case, then there could be an incentive for them to stay, to make sure that the business does
Perform.
Perform, especially if their security is the target itself.
Yes.
If we dig a little bit deeper on how you structured the purchase, so starting with the basics.
Yeah. Okay. So
share or asset purchase.
So it was share purchase. So again, taking the experience from the deal that was put together in the private equity.
Yeah.
I couldn't get my head around how it was going to become affordable. First and foremost, we were going to take on a loan, bring in some some debt into the business.
What kind of financing?
So we did. So part of the deal, we were looking at sort of 50% as a lump sum as initial
On
consideration
completion.
on completion, yeah,
Yeah.
and then the rest over a deferred period, and we agreed a 3-year period. The 50% came from a loan, so we tapped in through a finance broker
Yeah.
into the loan recovery scheme, or the COVID recovery scheme loan
Yeah.
that was still running
Bounce
at
back,
the time. And we raised about 3/4 of the initial consideration through a loan.
Fantastic.
And
Taken up by the target.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And the rest came from invoice finance. So
Yeah.
we used the debtor book to raise the finance for the initial consideration. That sort of worked.
Yeah. None of your own money.
None of my money. No.
I believe you told me earlier that 50% on completion isn't a random figure. That price matches
Yeah.
something about the business, doesn't it?
Yeah, so the net asset value of the business as per the balance sheet of the business,
Yeah.
50% was in line with the net asset value.
Yeah.
So when I put the initial offer in,
Yeah.
the broker's concern was it was below the net asset value.
I see.
So he felt there was a potential risk to the sellers that we could do we could
Liquidate and
complete,
sell off.
liquidate, and be in a better position,
Yeah.
a week in, and close the business. Well,
Yeah.
that's a fact that could happen. That wasn't my intention, obviously, but
Yeah.
so with the revised offer, that's why the initial consideration became more in line with a target, what we called it in NAV, didn't we, net asset value. But it was quite tricky for the business to hit that, but it did. But we had a mechanism in there that if upon completion the asset value went up, then obviously the sellers got more. If it came down, if it was below that, obviously the purchase price was reduced. But we were pretty much, bang on, So that worked out.
Fantastic. And who was part of your deal team? You've had myself.
So I had
Did you have any
yourself.
accountant?
So I had my accountant and
Yeah.
I had a finance broker
Yeah.
on board.
So the finance broker helped secure financing.
Yes, yeah.
What was the role of the accountant?
Basically, just to assist with the financial due diligence of the
Yeah.
business. I'm sort of quite experienced in reading, financial reports. So I was quite confident in carrying out the financial due diligence, but I didn't want to shoot myself in the foot.
Yeah.
So I did want to get a sort of second opinion, really, just to make sure that I hadn't missed anything, or So they did a deep dive into the accounts, and it was all good. It was a really clean set of accounts, and a clean business, for want of a better word. Everything was as is.
Yeah.
And likewise with the legal side, the sellers were very, very open, because, as I said, we built this relationship
Yeah.
early doors, and again, taking some of the experiences from the private equity side, I really struggled with the outgoing owners of that business, because I didn't find them very truthful.
Mm.
And then, I was asking them questions that I sort of knew the answers, and I wasn't getting the same. I wasn't getting the same back.
Didn't match. Yeah.
So from that experience, I said to the sellers, I think it was the second meeting when we were sort of talking about what a deal would look like, and I think I put on the table that if there's anything bad, put it on the table now,
Yeah.
and we can deal with it.
Yeah.
And I believe they were honest. They were upfront, and they said, right, there was a couple of projects that had gone bad. They hadn't gone legal or anything, but there was certainly some noise around the projects, potentially some refunds, and they were open about that. And we said, well, the best thing you can do is deal with it before pre-completion.
Yeah.
If you can't, then leave a sum of money to deal with the problem.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. And I believe there was two issues that I think one got dealt with pre-completion, and the other one did get dealt with shortly after. I couldn't ask for a better seller, if I'm honest, because they were, just so honest and down. Didn't hide anything that was they thought might be a problem, and that comes back to the open relationship we had. What I did set up with one of the sellers, we used to have a weekly call every Monday after hours, so whenever all the staff had gone home, so that she could talk freely, and I felt that was great, because anything contentious that was coming up from the legal point of view or around the SPA or anything, we could have that open conversation and get it dealt with, without it, going, taking hours and hours of your time backwards and forwards with their solicitors.
Yeah.
And, so I thought that really helped keep the whole timeline.
Absolutely. And if I can share briefly my experience with that aspect, I completely agree that it is extremely useful, because ultimately both parties must agree as to what they're signing, and if they don't, it just takes one to not agree and the deal doesn't go through. And I think sometimes the parties maybe use the lawyers as a vehicle to communicate changes that they would like to make to the structure of the deal. And that typically isn't very helpful, because a lawyer's job is to represent their client, and typically that conflicts with the interests of the other lawyer who's representing the other side. So then it goes into legal. There are too many versions of the SPA being exchanged, and the deal stalls, and then you don't complete on time. And it's the legal's fault.
Always. But when that happens, I think sort of like deal fatigue can set in, can't it? Because you can be backwards and forwards on the same point for potentially weeks.
Yes.
When I bought my first business, that should have been a simple. We were buying it from family. Yeah. The everything was affordable. We didn't have to raise debt. It was all seller finance, and even that business had contentious that the legal teams just couldn't agree. Us as buyers and my father and his partner, we agreed. Yeah. But the legals couldn't. Yeah. They couldn't physically get it written down in one instance that it was, the heads of terms went backwards and forwards, and it's like that's not what we're proposing. Yeah. The wording's wrong. And it that just took, I don't know why, it just took forever, if I remember rightly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is great to see when the client does take control, manages also their lawyers, the team, because ultimately the advisors must follow the instructions of the client.
Yes.
We can advise of different aspects, identify risk, but ultimately it's for the parties to decide what goes into the contract. Mm-hmm. Of course, 50% of the price was deferred. Mm-hmm. Typically, a seller would maybe ask for a personal guarantee.
Yes.
Was that the case here? Did they at least ask for one?
I think they did, but they got told no. Just from my point of view, we had personal guarantees on the loan. Yeah. Not for the full amount. I believe capped. It was capped. Yeah. Then we had, with the invoice financing, we had personal guarantee for that. Yeah. I mean, that's 100%. So, but I treat that as a fairly safe personal guarantee. Okay. Because the mechanism of that, they always get their money from our customers before it comes to us. So it's a fairly safe one. But I didn't want to give another personal guarantee on top of this for the sellers. So I think we put a debenture in on the business assets as security instead. Yeah. Now the challenge came that they were then behind the banks in a sort of third tier.
But there's always a priority, even when it comes to personal guarantees. There are some that might rank higher than others, and at times, the target business, their net asset value might be higher than the buyer, the buyer's personal wealth. Although sometimes it's a point that needs to be negotiated. It might be in the best interest of the seller as well to simply take the target business as security. Yes, the deferred payments. So you created a group structure.
Yes, so obviously you helped us with that element, and I think that's a good thing to do if you're looking to buy more businesses. It just puts a nice structure in place, and likewise, if you then want to sell one element of that business, it makes it an easier process. So.
Yes, and it makes your accountant happy.
Yes.
More accountancy fees.
Yes.
Regarding post-purchase, you bought the business, you showed up. Did you have a speech? Did you give a speech to the employees? How did you go about introducing yourself?
Yeah, so I basically just introduced myself, gave a bit of my background, had a little speech, but I just wanted to try and instill some confidence that the message was business as usual.
Yeah.
Right, no major changes, just carry on doing what you're doing. You know, the business was performing well prior to us taking over, and really our target was just have the business continue doing what it was doing at the level it was, so it was business as usual. That was the message, and everybody sort of just took that on board and got on with it, really. Yeah.
How long did you wait until you implemented a change, and how significant was that change? Did you slow yourself into it?
I did, but I was, as I said before, I was really conscious not to make changes.
Yeah.
Just let's understand first.
Yes.
Before, but I could see, the fitting teams are a big resource to the business, and they need to be as efficient as possible. So I just felt with the planning was a little bit ad hoc. The guys would come back at the end of the day and say, what we doing tomorrow, give us 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you're, rushing around trying to find a job for them. Can they go there? Is this one ready for them? And it was just a little bit, it was creating a bit of downtime in the fitting team, which then you've still got the cost. So I wanted to improve the efficiency of that. So I probably made that change within the first couple of weeks. That was probably the biggest change I made.
Yeah.
Just to get that team better planning and better efficiency. We make our money fitting windows, so windows sitting in the factory, it's not generating any money. The cost is there.
Yeah.
So until we actually physically get them out of the factory and fitted, we're not generating any money. So that was probably the key change, really, make them more efficient.
Yeah, and it sounds like they were quite open to that change.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it helps them as well.
It helps them. They can see what they're doing. In the week, we have a visible whiteboard on the wall as a diary for the week, so they can physically look at it.
Yeah.
And see what job they're going on.
Yeah.
So they know where they're going to be.
Yeah.
Are they near home? Have they got to travel? Have they? And it just helps them plan their week.
Yeah. Okay. So a few words about your lawyer. That happened to be me.
Yes.
First, how did you find me? So which marketing channel led you to me?
I think it was through one of the social media channels. I think what attracted to me when we did the management buyout, as I touched on earlier, there was a couple of points that the lawyers sort of got hung up on.
Mm.
And bearing in mind, when we went through the management buyout, bearing in mind it was a simple deal, we agreed the deal in February and completed it at Christmas.
Jeez.
So it took 10 months, and this was a simple deal.
Yeah.
No financing needed.
Not much due diligence needed.
Not much due diligence. You try having a chat with your dad about about warranty claims and things like that. But it's like, what do you mean? There's no skeletons. If there was, I would tell you.
Yeah.
So it should have been a simple thing. But I just found our lawyer on the buy side to be good. I found that the lawyers on the sell side quite difficult to deal with and quite slow.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, my lawyer passed away a few years ago.
Sorry to
hear. So I haven't actually needed a lawyer until I got to this point where I want to buy this business. So it's time to look for a new one. And I don't know why. It's just probably how the algorithms work, and it's sort of like you popped up, and I liked what you were saying. I liked your approach. It was sort of proactive. Look, this is we have a fixed price. We have a menu. You choose the menu. That's the price. That's what you're getting for that price. And we'll be proactive and complete. Now, as I hinted earlier, we've got, I wanted to complete by March, mainly because I was running out of savings. So, it was paramount. I didn't want this dragging on, and I think in our initial conversation, I think you said actually we could do this depending on the seller side, we could do this in about 6 weeks. And I don't know if you remember, there was some challenges on the seller's lawyer side that the guy who was representing them, he sort of disappeared, whether he left the business.
Unknown.
He just disappeared. And then there was a week or two of limbo where we were emailing him, but getting no response. And the completion date, if I remember rightly, we were only about 2-3 weeks from completion.
Yes.
And then they had to have a new member of their team come in, get up to speed with it all. Who
were great, by the way.
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah. And but we still managed to complete on time. Yeah. I mean, it's, I think that week of completion, the lead up to that was very tense.
Yes.
There's a lot of ground to cover in that last week, and certainly a lot of ground to cover.
A lot of hair lost.
A lot of hair lost, yeah, definitely. A lot of wine drunk. Yeah. But we had, if you remember, we had a final. There was a hiccup in the financing at the 11th hour as well, where a customer had paid an invoice early.
Yes.
Due to it being Easter.
Yeah.
And then that brought the debtor book down.
That's
and then
right. We had to amend the SPA last minute.
Yeah, the invoice finance, and we couldn't. But again, it came down to the rapport with the sellers and said, look, this is where we're at, and they were happy just to move that shortfall onto the deferred to get the whole thing over the line. There's some sort of quick calculations going on.
Yes.
Sort of last minute, trying to get the wording right, and. But no, we got there in the end. And I think if you remember wasn't it the seller's bank transfer had a cut off at 3 o'clock?
Because there is, yes.
Yeah, so I think we completed it bang on 3, and the sellers actually didn't get their money until after.
That's right, because I think the seller's law firm, I think it was their year end maybe.
Yeah, something
so
like
then
that.
they weren't accepting any more money after a certain hour. And then, like you said, it was the long weekend.
Yeah.
So we would have had to delay by a few days.
Yeah.
And I don't like delaying things. I come from Switzerland, although I've got Italian in me.
Yeah.
That Swiss part of being on time, and being organized as well is very much part of me. So I remember us trying to complete at all costs. So trying to scramble ideas for how to make it on time.
And for the sellers again were great. They said, well, we'll just take our payment on Tuesday when the bank's open again, and you can do the transfer.
They were great.
And I'm not sure there's going to be too many that would complete, and
But that is also thanks to you. I think it's strangely wanting to build rapport with the seller isn't something that is always done.
Yeah.
Quite the contrary. I've seen cases where the parties were quite adversarial.
Yeah.
And I don't see how that is going to be conducive to finding compromise when it comes to negotiating a long contract and dealing with complex issues.
Yeah.
But you did decide to build that rapport. You were quite intentional, I believe, about it.
Yes, yeah, definitely, yes.
And it did pay off.
Yes.
So we completed earlier, probably at a better price, and with better terms.
Yes, yeah.
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 Well, ultimately, you build that rapport with a client.
Yes. Yeah.
And it paid off.
Yeah.
You've now bought a successful business where people are happy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, what I was going to say was the selling the business is a very emotional process for the sellers. This is something that they've put their life and soul in over numbers of years, built it up, been through good times, bad times.
Yeah.
And as somebody that they don't know coming in to buy their business, you've got to prove to them that you're the right guy, and their business is going to be in safe hands, especially when there's a deferred, you have to build that confidence,
trust.
and trust.
Yes.
And trust is a big one. That you're the right person and you're gonna honour what you say you're gonna do.
Yeah.
So.
And sometimes it isn't just about the money with sellers. Yes,
No.
you're right. They want to make sure that someone is not going to drive the business into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are different techniques that some buyers might take. For example, being more aggressive with the breach of warranty claims.
Yeah.
Some sellers have other requirements of their buyers that aren't just about the financials.
Yeah.
Rapport could be one of them. How they're going to be dealing with their clients.
Mm-hmm.
Some sellers might have built a strong and long-standing rapport with their clients, and they want to make sure that their clients are going to be in safe hands.
Yeah.
So it sounds like when they came to speaking with you, that did play a factor.
Yeah, and I think the other factor was that this is a family-orientated business.
Yeah.
I had come from a family-orientated business.
Got the T-shirt.
And the staff are important. The staff have been there on the seller's journey.
Yeah.
Some of the staff in the business, have been there 20 plus years.
Yeah.
So, they want to ensure that those staff are going to get looked after.
Yeah.
And, not treated badly, in the future. So it's, as you say, it's not all about the price. It's the other items in the mix.
Yeah. There are quite a few elements when it comes to structurings, as we discussed. But lastly, not to spend too much time talking about your lawyer, but would you recommend working with me?
I already have.
You have?
Yeah, I have recommended. I think you did exactly what you said you were going to do at the price that you were going to do, and we completed on time, and I can't ask any more than that. You pushed through the challenges that we had, and more than happy, and definitely use you again.
Thank you. Very kind. So, if we look back at the deal, are there any lessons that you think are worth sharing with anyone watching this podcast?
I think the hardest part was the finance side, raising the finance. As soon as heads of terms are signed, start that ball rolling, or even before, start having conversations if you're going to use a finance broker.
Yeah.
Because you have to jump through a lot of hoops. You have to prove your credibility to the lenders. There's a lot of questions get asked. They do a lot of digging into your own personal background and just make sure what's your history, where you've been, what businesses have you run, and it's all around the risk of them lending you the money, and they're looking for cash flow forecasts, projections, budgets. So all this sort of takes time.
Yeah.
Obviously your accountant can help with a lot of this. But just start that ball rolling at the earliest opportunity. Because even in my deal, on the day of completion, we were still, right at the 11th hour and 59th minute, trying to sort out the finance with the invoice finance. And it is all around the debtor book value at the moment of completion, and is it at the right level? Yeah, is it at the right level to allow them to release the funds that you need at the right time? And we were, if you remember, all the paperwork was signed. We were ready to complete, and we had a 2 or 3 hour wait just for the finance just to do their final bit. So that was probably the hardest part. Nothing was easy. It's not easy, but it is doable. Yeah. It is doable. People have asked me about sort of buying businesses and things like that, and I think the biggest thing, not every business for sale is, or you can't buy every business that's for sale. You have to have all the right ingredients within that business. Yeah. If you're going for a certain type of finance, if it's a debtor book, they've got to be the right type of debtors. Yeah. You've got to be dealing B2B in that scenario. You can't be doing B2C. Yeah. So you've got to find the right business. That takes time. You do have to kiss a few frogs, as they say. Yeah. You have to sort of dig deep, and even in my experience, I had 2 offers declined on two separate businesses.
No counters.
One was the first one was just a refusal. There wasn't a counter because we were miles apart on valuation to the point my offer probably offended the seller.
Yeah.
But I felt that was a good offer for that size of business. That business is still for sale, 18 months on. So, it's still looking for a unicorn, which I said at the time, that what you're looking for, you're going to have extremely difficulty finding. A second business, we put an offer in, we had an offer accepted.
Yeah.
I even think we potentially got to a heads of term stage on that as well, but couldn't raise the finance on it.
I see.
It didn't have the right ingredients to enable the finance people to get the funds for it. So,
which is a bit of a criteria in its own, isn't it?
Yes.
If a lender won't lend, maybe it's a business that we should think twice about buying.
Yes.
There is a reason why they won't lend.
Won't lend, yes. Yeah. It's all about the cash flow and the cash generation of the
assets
business
and
assets. So this particular one had very few assets.
Yeah.
It was a decent sized business, had good turnover, had good profit.
Yeah.
But the amount that we could borrow was a lot less than what the sellers wanted on day one.
Yeah.
So, we went back and said, look, this is where we're at, and it was a smaller initial consideration and a higher deferred. From the seller's point of view, it was too risky. They wanted a higher, and I just said, we just can't do it. We just can't raise that money. I mean, there was an interesting one there that the business had quite a large Sybil's loan.
Okay.
And the sellers had used that money to build some properties, so they borrowed it from the business to build the properties.
In their personal name?
In another business.
Okay, separate business.
Yeah, and then they were then going to repay that loan. So they'd taken it as a director's loan, build the properties, sell the properties, pay the loan back.
Right, okay.
So upon completion, that loan was going to get repaid.
Yeah.
So part of the deal, we said, well, I'll take on that loan.
Okay.
As part, so you don't pay that back. I'll take that as part of the initial consideration, and the business will just carry on paying that loan as it had been. But
meaning we deduct the value of the loan from the completion payment.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
But the loan stays.
Yes. You pay it off when you take over the business.
Yeah. You got to look at the transfer of the loan and all that. The loan was secured on the property.
Yeah.
Of the sellers.
I see.
So that was a non-starter.
Yeah.
So we just couldn't. We were just the valuation. We all felt was right and agreed, but the structure of the deal, we just couldn't get the structure.
Is that one still on for sale?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
Have you gone back and said, would you reconsider the completion payment? By now they could have sold the business.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't got it more than.
I haven't gone back. No. But I don't know if I would. I don't know if I would now.
With hindsight, you wouldn't.
Yeah. No. I feel the business I've bought is a better business.
I see. So this is not something that this acquisition wouldn't form part of your bigger strategy.
No,
it's not.
No,
it's a similar one to what you've already bought.
So this was more with my background in furniture.
I see.
It was more a sort of kitchen based.
I see.
Sort of business. So good business, really good business. But as you said, in hindsight, I wouldn't go back to that and buy that now, because I don't think nothing's changed. It was just the structure would still be the structure. Yeah. And unless the sellers change their view on it, which I don't think they would.
Right.
So it was a non-starter. And then actually I had a third, which the valuation, again, my valuation was what I thought that business was worth.
Yeah.
But I liked the business, so that actually pushed the price up.
I see.
But again, we couldn't agree on the valuation, and we definitely couldn't agree on the structure. But it all comes around to affordability again.
Yeah.
And again, that business is still for sale.
Which I think is an indication of the wider
Yeah.
market at the moment.
Yeah.
Would you say that there is almost an oversupply of businesses, maybe because of retiring owners?
There's a lot of businesses for sale,
Yes.
but I mean, the statistic of businesses that don't sell
It's huge.
is
isn't
huge.
it?
Yeah, it's sort of 85-90%.
Yeah, that's what
is
I've seen as well.
the figure, but I can see why, because it's it's expectation.
Yeah.
It's always somebody's lifelong, sort of career, and they want a big payout at the end, and sometimes it's just not possible.
Yeah.
There's not a queue of people with a spare few million or whatever you need.
No. No.
Sort of queuing up.
And the risk associated with buying a business is significant. Is at least
it is. Yeah. I mean, once it's your name over the door,
yes,
everything is now on you. All the problems in that business now become your problems.
and that's assuming you don't put any of your own money into it.
Exactly.
Because if you do, then you've got that element as well. It could be a fantastic opportunity for someone or for anyone who is willing to go out there, negotiate, spend time speaking with sellers, and has enough maybe patience for a deal to
patience is definitely this is not a quick process.
Yeah.
I mean, as we've said, I feel that the legal side of going through the DD in this instance was quick at 3 months.
Yeah.
But the process of getting to that point takes time.
Yes.
It's finding the right business. I mean, I came across another business again in furniture, good turnover, good profit. All the accounts over the years looked fantastic.
Yeah.
And I was really, really keen. And I said, look, I'm keen on this one. Have you got this year's current management accounts?
Mm.
And they painted the total opposite picture. I mean, from a business that had gone for years, been really good, growing, profitable, within the space of about 9 months turned into a total car crash.
Yeah.
It was in a huge loss-making position. They had properties in the business that they were selling to prop up cash flow.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, what's changed in that short period? So it looked good.
Yeah.
But once you see the current, something massive has changed.
Yeah, and that's not an uncommon scenario where you find a business that's for sale, and if you look at the history of the financials, it seems as time passes, for example, last 3 years, profit and revenue go down further with every year passing, which is maybe why the seller wants to sell, wants to get rid of a sinking ship. Yeah. But it's also not a great time to value your business.
No.
If it is indeed a sinking ship. And when business is great and growing and more profits every year, the seller might not want to sell. But in your experience, if you do see a business that has revenue that is decreasing alongside profit decreasing, is that an immediate red flag which you cannot look
You have
past?
to dig into it. You have to dig into it and understand the reasons. There may be a reason why, but it may be around the business has lost a customer. It's lost a contract. The business may have had a contract that inflated the figures for a year or two, and it's just dropped back down to a normal level.
Yeah.
So you have to do.
How many years do you look at?
I went back about 4 years.
4 years.
Which sort of covered the COVID years.
Yeah.
Because also during the COVID period, there was grants available.
Yeah.
There was, the furlough scheme. So money was coming in to the business, which would, in a set of accounts, potentially showing at the top, but wouldn't necessarily be there today. Yeah. So you have to be mindful of when you're looking through the COVID years. It's just be mindful of that. There's a lot of businesses put on the market because they're in trouble, and the owner has literally just gone, "Oh, I've had enough.
Yeah,
I'm out of steam. I'm going to sell up." But that's the worst from a seller's point of view. That's the worst thing you can do. I mean, I'm fortunate enough. The business I bought, I feel the sellers previously to put it onto market got rid of a lot of the problematic contracts and sort of steered the business in a slightly different direction, which has paid off. So,
do you think they did that intentionally to get the business ready for sale?
I think it was, yes. I think it was done for two reasons. They were doing a lot of sort of domestic properties.
Yeah.
Brings in its own problems.
Yeah.
You have to give 10-year guarantees with domestic properties. So you've got this huge warranty period. They wanted to move away from that and concentrate more on the commercial markets. So one, it was to make the business look more attractive, but I think two, it was just to take some of the pain away that they'd been experiencing from warranties and things like that. So, and I've just carried it on in the same vein. We just stay with the commercial side, and if somebody, what in the trade we call retail customer, Mrs. Smith wanting, a new set of windows, we just decline that now, or we give them we don't do it. We can do a supply only, and here's a team of guys that can come and fit it for you. So
who are not our company.
Not our company. So
and then they take on the warranty.
They take it, buy the windows from us, and
I see. They buy the. I see.
And then any warranties is then on them.
Yes.
For
that's right.
Because the contract's between those two, not us and the final customer.
And between you two as a B2B.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So that works. That works for us.
Yeah. But do you have a relationship with someone?
Yes.
Locally?
Yeah. We have local people that 2 or 3 that we can. It's not an everyday occurrence. It's probably once a week.
Yeah.
But we just refer.
Valuable.
Yeah.
Valuable relationship nonetheless.
Yeah. Just pass that on.
Fantastic. Mm-hmm. Well, David, thank you so much for your time.
Okay. You're more than welcome. I really enjoyed talking about it, and I think it's an experience that can be done. It's certainly achievable.
Yeah.
But you've really got to put in quite a substantial amount of hard work to get the deals over the line, and then once you've got the completion, that's when the real hard work then starts.
Begins.
That's when it's you've got to take the business forward then.
Yeah.
But thank you for inviting me, and
thank you.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Same here.
Thank you.
Fantastic.